record arms transfer have further boosted the bottom lines of weapons firms. These companies have benefited from tens of billions of dollars in military aid to Israel and Ukraine, paid for by the U.S. taxpayers. U.S. military aid to Israel was over $18 billion in just the first year following October 2023. Military aid to Ukraine totals $65 billion since the Russian invasion in 2022 through 2025. Additionally, Bill writes, a surge in foreign-funded arms sales to European allies paid for by the recipient nations of over $170 billion in 23 and 24 alone, and that's something I had no earthly idea about. I didn't realize it was that high, have provided additional revenue to arms contractors over and above the funds they received directly from the Pentagon. And I see Bill is back here, so yay for that. And Bill, you have good timing here. Man, tell us a little bit about this, and what is the result when you have this kind of spending going into these defense contractors, both from the U.S. budget as well as overseas budgets?
Well, first I should say, although technology doesn't win wars, it's been winning the battle against me today. Well, it's so much money. In fact, they can't even spend it. I mean, the system is like so full, there's not enough factories, not enough workers. I mean, the companies certainly take the money, but they can't get the stuff out the door. And so the answer of the Hawks is, let's make our whole economy a garrison state, which is what Eisenhower warned against. I mean, he said, the thing you need to defend your country is not more gadgets. It's a well-educated, healthy, unified, well-motivated country. It's about people. And yet, at the moment, we're cutting veterans' benefits. There's military folks on food stamps. They're cutting back training to buy these big-ticket systems. We don't need another ballistic missile. We don't need aircraft carriers that can be taken out by modern missiles. And even when the Pentagon tries to make a little bit of a shift, Congress says no. I mean, the literal combat ship, which wasn't really good for anything, when they tried to kill it, Congress put 5 of them back in the budget. When they retire old aircraft, Congress keeps them in the budget. So even if the Pentagon had a clearer vision, we would need to kind of bust up that system of influence. I mean, if you look at Afghanistan, the Afghanistan papers for the Washington Post, at least 10 years before the end of the war, everybody in authority in Washington knew we weren't going to win. But they covered it up. And there's a film called Something I Want to Tell You, where vets said, look, I don't know why they sent me there. It didn't seem like we could win. My government lied to me, and I had to do things that have haunted me, for the rest of my life. So, the people who served know that this is a broken system. And in fact, they've had a hard time recruiting. Usually they get a lot of folks from military families. Folks who've served in these wars have said, yeah, you don't want to do that. And yet, these pundits who got us into this mess are still featured all over the media. I mean, they should be laughed out of town. And likewise,
Right.
If you're a diplomat who claims you're for a rules-based order and you didn't lift a finger to stop mass slaughter in Gaza, why would anybody listen to you? So the problems are deep. And of course, it's not just the folks coming from the Pentagon into, lobbying. Anthony Blinken came out of a strategic advising company, West Exec Advisors, that had many military contractors as clients. So it's this little bubble of folks who are making good money and reinforcing each other's arguments and trying to attack people who speak common sense. But I think eventually, if we can get people's attention, I think they can understand this is no way to defend a country.
I wonder if you could speak a little bit on that. You just kind of alluded to it. This revolving door between senior government positions, senior Pentagon officials, and these defense contractors. How does that work?
Well, basically, if you're in government, you want to make good money when you leave. And the good money is going to Lockheed Martin, going to Boeing, being a lobbyist, helping them decipher the weapons buying regulations. But also what's happening now is military folks are going to work for these venture capital firms that invest in this new AI-driven weaponry. So they're playing the same game as Lockheed Martin, and the industry has 950 lobbyists most of whom went through the revolving door. So many more than each member of Congress. So they're, deluged with these folks. And because they've taken contributions from them, there's an open door to hear their case. And then if they also say, well, hey, I got this plant in your district, and hey, look at this, commission that says we need to do this, without telling them that commission is biased because it's run by people from industry. For example, they had a big commission about how we need to spend even more on nuclear weapons, co-chaired by John Kyle, who was a lobbyist for Northrop Grumman, which makes the new ICBM, the new bomber. Not a word was said about that. They treated him like he was an objective observer, and most of the members talked about not what should our nuclear strategy be, but about, well, I have this great missile in my state, we need more of them. Finally, Senator Warren said, what's it going to cost? And they said, oh, it's too important to count the cost, except for every other item in the budget. And of course, this idea of a garrison state, I mean, this new bill, they're cutting medical care, they're cutting nutrition, they're cutting science research, they're cutting diplomacy to make room for this $1 trillion budget and a bunch of tax cuts. So they're kind of stripping down America to the bone in terms of our ability to be a kind of a unified nation with multiple tools to protect ourselves. So, to the extent that there's concern, is America losing power in the world? These guys are accelerating that process under the guise of acting tough. But, they're really just lining their pockets, and those are these companies.
And let me just show you from Responsible Statecraft. Your organization there helps publish this. This is from just earlier this month, where Bidenites make soft landing in heart of lucrative war industry, where Lloyd Austin, Bette McGurk joined DC's top consultants. And and Lloyd Austin came out of the defense industrial complex. I mean, he was working for some of these organizations before he became the Secretary of Defense, and now he's gone right back into it. And you see, and the article continues on there, and it talks about how a lot of other people are doing it, and so nothing has changed, and the whole thing goes on, which I guess is right. At least what's important for your work here, to at least shine a light on that.
Well, the interesting thing is during confirmation, Austin promised Senator Warren he would not go work as a lobbyist when he left government, but I guess the dollar signs and the zeros changed his mind. Yeah, no, it's really amazing. I mean, I did a thing about what do 3- and 4-star generals and admirals do when they leave, and in the last 5 years, 80% of them went to work for the arms industry in one way or another. So there'd be people who were dissenters, people who started things like the Center for Defense Information, high-ranking military officials. But by the time 80% of them go into industry, there's nobody left to speak up. I mean, the main critics are the folks who've been on the front lines, the officers, the people who've seen war. But a lot of the generals and admirals are really kind of political generals who are just figuring out their next career move.
And what impact does that have on the current crop at any given time of generals in there, when they see 80% of those guys that resign end up going over there? What impact does that have on them while they're at these high positions?
Well, they make about 200,000, all kinds of perks. But, if you went to a venture capital firm, you might make millions. Or if you went to a board, you could make 200,000 to go to 4 meetings a year. So they see this and they think, well, I want a piece of that. There was one guy that we found who went to work running his local school district back home. But the rest of them, almost all, went to these companies. So they're looking ahead to which means, if you're sitting down across the table from Lockheed Martin, if you don't want to drive too tough a deal, because then you won't get a job in industry, which is what you want to do. And, the guy who signed off on the final contract for the F-35 went to the board of Lockheed Martin shortly thereafter. And they're the producer of the F-35. So it's just very hard to get objective conversation, objective advice. And I think it's a mixture of folks who know that this is a cynical thing and they're cashing in. Other folks, they believe this stuff and they're also cashing in. So it's sort of I guess for them, it's the best of both worlds. But nonetheless, we need a lot more independent voices like yours and others. And then we need all the possible ways of reaching people. I think, the fact that the media is broken up, that there's podcasts, there's other ways to reach people is a positive, but there's also just a flood of information and misinformation And of course, the other side spends vast amounts of money. And also, the Pentagon has an office in Hollywood to try to influence how their stuff is
Right.
movies. They're connected with the gaming, and they're embedded in the culture, not just in the traditional
Well, and
lobbying.
I want to shift to that part of your article here, or your report, because this is not just a current situation here. I think that you primarily focused on the last 5 years, but you also do a section over the first quarter of this century, and look at how the defense spending has gone up. And this also kind of shocked me a little bit, I have to say. You wrote that the total military spending grew from $531 billion in 2000 to $899 billion in 2025, and you specified earlier that that was in constant dollars, so it's an apples to apples comparison. A 69% increase. Legislation passed early in July, or this month, adds $156 billion to this year's total, pushing the 2025 budget to $1.06 trillion. After taking into account this supplemental funding, the U.S. military budget has nearly doubled this century, increasing 99% since the year 2000. How in the world has that happened?
Well, again, kudos to my co-author, Steve Semler, who's a genius at analyzing these numbers. But the first 10 years after 9/11, it went up every year, which had never happened before in the history of Pentagon spending. And every time there's an opportunity, like pulling out of Afghanistan, if you paid close attention to President Biden's speech, he said, "Oh yeah, well, terrorism has metastasized all over the world. We need to use the resources elsewhere, and we can always come over the horizon and attack Afghanistan if we need to." So he wasn't saying, "Oh yeah, there's a peace dividend." He was saying, "Let's redistribute our troops and how we allocate military assets." And of course, at the end of Vietnam, there were some reductions, end of the Cold War, but the Pentagon and the contractors fought back to make sure the cuts were as little as possible, and they got back on track to making money. And then I think, the thing about the jobs issue is, if you invested in anything else, there would be more jobs. But these jobs already exist; they're entrenched. My colleague Miriam Pemberton did a book on how would you wean our economy from dependence on Pentagon spending, and a lot of the communities that get a lot of Pentagon money also have the highest poverty rates because the it serves the factory, it serves some people, but it doesn't build a diversified local economy. So we're tied into this stuff, and we can't invest in the jobs of the future. We're tied to the jobs of the past. So I think the biggest cost is just we're kind of stymied here. We can't make changes in what weapons we spend on because Congress won't let us. We can't shift research to other areas. I mean, they spend more on the F-35 in a given year than they spend on the Environmental Protection Agency or the Centers for Disease Control. So something that small change for the Pentagon could do real benefits
And
elsewhere.
of course, it's also true that all this money that's going to all these programs is a net negative or zero for the economy and for our country. All this money that we're spending, and yeah, it's great for the jobs here, but it produces nothing for the country itself. It just goes into either to Ukraine or to Israel or into storehouses to be used in future conflicts, but it doesn't produce anything of value to our country.
No, you buy a tank, you get a tank. If you invest in productive tools, they create further growth. There's a multiplier effect. So these are dead end expenditures, but it's what Congress will pass. It's one of the few things members agree on because of all the money involved, and I think because it's a simple story to say, I'm tough, I'm standing up for America.
Right. Yeah,
but I'd rather that they be tough minded than pretending to be tough, because
that's we're all about that. And in fact, I want to shift in the last few minutes that we have here to one of the last sections that you wrote about, and that's basically, can we reorient our policies? Is there a better way to get this done? You wrote, what remains is the most important issue is whether U.S. national defense strategy is aligned with the actual security environment the U.S. faces. The current cover of the globe strategy, which stresses quest for military dominance and the ability to intervene anywhere on the globe in short order, has not served the U.S. well in this century. The question is whether the U.S. can have a reasonable national debate on a new defense strategy that is not distorted by the influence of the wealthy weapons sector. So I guess I'll just ask you to answer that question. Is there any possibility where we could get that, or is the system I mean, I hate to use the term because it has some negative connotations, but is it rigged to where that debate can't happen and the only thing we'll talk about is how tough we're going to be on whoever the enemy of today is?
Well, I think Eisenhower had it right. You need an alert and knowledgeable citizenry. Congress and the administration are corrupted because of this whole system. The people will speak up. Bernie Sanders spoke up back in the day. Senator Proxmire, Senator Warren has talked a bit, and there are some others. Chuck Grassley is not clear on everything, but at least he thinks the Pentagon should be able to pass an audit. But it's a small number who are standing up and speaking truth, and a lot of other ones who are compromised no matter what they say. A lot of liberals and progressives who talk a good game don't want to vote against a weapon in their state. And then they say, oh, you vote for my weapon, I'll vote for your weapon. Pretty soon the whole budget is locked up. So we need people to sort of step back and say, do we really need this? And I think people understand that Iraq and Afghanistan did not work and were not worth the effort. But I think there's a couple things. One is, they don't. It's like, well, what can I do about it? You know, as you said, they think the system's rigged and they don't think democracy's working and they don't want to stick their necks out, just take care of themselves and their families. But it's not working that way now, because whether you want to avoid this, you can't, because it's affecting your budget, your future, your kids' future. And I think if people kind of think about, we need a different approach. It can't all be about weapons, because it's, as we said, it hasn't worked. And it's, I think, yeah, it's got to be kind of at the grassroots level. I think this current policy, it's not good for workers. It's not good for other kinds of businesses. It's not good for running a democracy. A lot of people are being hurt by it, but they're not coming together. And I think it's partly because on many issues, people are sitting back and saying, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to fight the power. So we have to come together. I think it's almost like old school. You know, instead of just throwing stuff up on social media, I think we need teach-ins where people can talk at length. They can think through problems. There's got to be a bit of tolerance for other views so that we can at least get to the core of these things, because I think people can differ on a lot of other things, but I don't think they really want a garrison state that loses wars and guts our economy and really forecloses a better future, you know, for our country.
Well, yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on that. And unfortunately, I think that probably that's not going to happen until people start suffering some pain, until some of these start materializing, some of these risks. And I think it probably is inevitable that's going to happen. And so the hope is that with work like yours and a number of other people that I know there at Quincy, that some other folks at the Program on Government Oversight, Danielle Bryan is a great one who champions this a lot, is that when that starts happening, there's already information out there for how to start turning it around. So that's my hope, is that when things start going south, that there's plans like this out there that people can reach out to continue to, to make a difference instead of just being swept up in whatever happens. Is there any website or something that people can go to if they have an interest in finding out more on this topic?
Well, ours is quincyinst.org, but if you just Google Quincy Institute, you'll be good. I mean, sometimes you get Quincy Jones or Quincy, Massachusetts, but usually you get us. And they're good folks. But yeah, and as for my stuff, and the wonders of Google, if you Google my name, you get a lot of the stuff. I also write a column for Forbes, for Time Dispatch, and whoever will take me, really. So yeah, there's a lot of information out there. What I've learned is that you can know a lot about the power on the other side, but you need organizers, you need educators, you need people to build power. Otherwise, as I sometimes say in my talks to people, if there weren't people trying to change this, what I do would be just kind of some sort of peculiar hobby. But there are people trying to change it, and the information is being used more than in the past. So I'm hopeful, and there's a lot of young, dynamic folks who are digging into this and are committed, passionate, giving me a run for my money. In fact, I can't keep up with some of them. So they're also going to carry, a lot of this. So yeah, I mean, there's no guarantees of anything, but I think there's a lot of potential out there to turn the country around and put us in a more positive place. As long as we understand that we're in this together. The more we scapegoat, the more we divide, the more we're distracted from addressing the real problems.
Yeah, well, that's good. It's good that there is some optimism out there, and I'm glad you're seeing those. And we certainly advise all kinds of people to follow this up and to take action to the extent that you can. Thank you very much for casting such a strong light on this issue. It doesn't get enough, and we're grateful to have you on today.
Yeah, I'm going to send my computer out to the woodshed, but I'm glad we got to talk.
All right. Glad it finally worked out. All right. Well, thank you guys very much. And thank you for joining us today. Just as a reminder, we're on podcasts, also Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podcast Addict, anywhere you get your podcast. Type in Daniel Davis Deep Dive, and you should find us waiting there for you. Thank you very much. And we'll see you tomorrow on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.